The biggest problem with this whole Tiffany Hayes and Caitlin Clark situation is not trash talk, and it is not what happened on the court. People talk. Players get in each other's faces. Competitors try to throw each other off their game every night. That part of basketball has existed forever, but once a conversation leaves the court and moves into something involving real-world harm, people start looking at it differently. That is where this entire story changed. Because during the Indiana Fever win over Golden State, Tiffany Hayes and Caitlin Clark had a competitive moment that honestly looked like normal basketball emotion. Hayes was talking, trying to get under Clark's skin, getting physical, trying to disrupt her rhythm. That happens. Players do it all the time. And Clark answered the way great players usually do. She hit a deep shot and responded right back. Fans loved it because that's competition. That's sports. That's the stuff people replay online. But after the game is where the conversation exploded. Because fans started talking online and, like always, social media immediately turned into chaos. And we all know how that works. You have normal fans reacting to the game, and then you have people who take things way too far. That happens with every sport and every athlete. According to the documented posts that started circulating, Hayes interacted with messages that moved beyond basketball and into comments involving off-court violence toward Caitlin Clark. One particular message reportedly referenced having people willing to act on her behalf outside of basketball. Hayes then responded in a way many people viewed as supportive or amused, using language that quickly became the center of the controversy. And this is where I think people are missing the point. Because some people are trying to frame this as basketball rivalry. Others are acting like this is simply internet drama. But those are not really the same thing. Talking trash during a game is basketball. Playing physical defense is basketball. Trying to get inside another player's head is basketball. A social media interaction involving comments about physical harm outside the sport becomes a completely different conversation. Because once that happens, it is no longer just about two players competing. Now people start asking questions about responsibility, platform influence, and league standards. And here's something important that gets lost when emotions take over. Nobody is saying Hayes personally threatened Caitlin Clark. That is not what the documented issue is. The issue people reacted to was her public engagement with comments that described violence toward another player. That's why this became such a big story. And whether someone thinks the interaction was serious, sarcastic, careless, or just a bad decision, honestly does not change why people reacted so strongly. Because context matters. Caitlin Clark has already dealt with documented security situations in the past, including stalking concerns that involve law enforcement. So people are not viewing this in a vacuum. They're looking at it through that context. And I think that's why fans immediately started saying the WNBA needed to respond. Not because Clark hit a shot, not because Hayes talked trash, not because two players got heated. People reacted because the line between competition and personal safety suddenly became part of the conversation. And now the attention shifts toward the league itself. Because this is where consistency starts becoming the real topic. The WNBA recently fined Stephanie White over public comments criticizing officiating. That happened quickly. It was public. The league act. Now fans are looking at this situation and asking a pretty straightforward question. If criticism of referees received a fast response, what happens here? And to be clear, these situations are not identical. Complaining about officiating and interacting with social media posts involving violence are completely different things. But that difference is exactly why people are asking questions. Because fans are trying to understand what standards actually matter most. If a league acts quickly in one situation, but slowly in another, people start creating their own conclusions. Fair or unfair, that's reality. And this matters because the WNBA is not the same league it was a few years ago. The spotlight is bigger now. The audience is bigger now. The business side is bigger now. More media attention, more expectations. Everything gets amplified. And when leagues grow, every decision suddenly carries more weight. People are not only watching games anymore, they're watching how organizations handle controversy. They're watching whether standards stay consistent. They're watching whether player safety is treated seriously. And they're watching whether emotions, popularity, or media pressure affect outcomes. Then there's another part of this that deserves attention too. Social media has become one of the strangest parts of modern sports. Because players today are not just athletes, they're brands, they're public figures. One quick interaction online can become national news in minutes. Something that might have felt like a casual response suddenly becomes screenshots, headlines, debates, and nonstop discussions across the internet. And once that starts, controlling the narrative becomes almost impossible. Because people saw another reported part of this story too. Hayes was said to be blocking people who were criticizing her online after the situation spread. Now, whether someone agrees with blocking people or not is another debate entirely. Athletes deal with ridiculous amounts of hate online every day. Nobody should pretend otherwise. But fans looked at that and felt like it wasn't accountability. They felt like it looked more like avoiding the conversation instead of addressing it. Again, that's where perception becomes powerful. Because once people think someone is avoiding criticism, they usually become even louder. And now here we are. The game itself is almost an afterthought. A fever win turned into a social media controversy. A competitive moment turned into discussions about conduct standards. And now everybody is waiting to see if the league says something publicly. Because whether people support Hayes, support Clark, or think the entire situation is being overanalyzed, the bigger issue has become the same question across the basketball world.